Teck-talk on understanding managed SASE, the why, what, and how. I'm sure you're curious to know more about this topic. With this, we're welcoming our esteemed speaker, Shashi Kiran, the Chief Marketing Officer, Aryaka, joining us. Well, Shashi brings over 25 plus years of experience in marketing and product management roles, having worked in a variety of high-tech companies, including large corporations like Cisco and Nortel, as well as several startups. Well, with this, I'd like to humbly welcome on the stage and screen Shashi. Shashi, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Bhavna. I'm doing well. Appreciate you giving me a slot to share some session.
Absolutely. So with this, Shashi, the stage and screen is all yours. We request you to now start with the presentation. Over to you.
Okay. So thank you all for giving us this opportunity. What I'm going to share in the next 15 minutes or so are some thoughts about this journey to SASE. The previous session was more about SD-WAN and things that are going out there in the industry. These are all fairly interrelated, and we just wanted to share some thoughts from our perspective. As Bhavna mentioned, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at this company called Aryaka Networks. We are a leading player for both SD-WAN and SASE architectures with over 600 plus enterprise customers globally. And as for my own background, I've been more than 25 years in this high-tech industry, working for Aryaka now and for Cisco and other companies in the past. And I also am fairly immersed in the startup ecosystem based out of San Jose, California. So before we sort of get into the whole nature of the SASE discussion, I just wanted to put some of the trends that we're seeing in perspective. And a lot of you would have gone through some of these yourselves at a personal level or at a professional level. To put them in context, one of the major things that we're seeing is the shift and the movement of applications to cloud. We're all consuming these SaaS applications. Public clouds have continued to grow at a scorching pace, which means the traditional data center model has made way to what we call as a cloud-first architecture. And in an ironical sense, the data center isn't necessarily the center of data anymore. At the same time, we've also had the shift in terms of where the employees are located that has been accelerated as a result of the pandemic to a large extent. And this shift has actually disrupted the security models where the static perimeter security is no longer relevant, and it has led to the need for a very dynamic, pervasive security scenario. The third major trend we've seen is really the shift in demographics and the affinity towards more consumption-based models as a service, on-demand, usage-based. So these are all things that we have gotten used to in our personal lives, equating them with convenience and simplicity. And those are all the things that we expect in a professional environment as well, where the age-old monolithic legacy applications and architectures are no longer convenient. And so the culmination of these three trends, in part accelerated by the pandemic, in part the shift towards Gen Z demographics, is also disrupting the traditional architectures. And in that, my focus is going to be more on network and security, where the status quo is definitely ripe for change. For a lot of the CIOs that we end up engaging with, the careabouts for them really haven't changed for a long period of time. But what they are dealing with right now is the rapidity of the change. And there is this need to maintain order amidst all of the chaos and to maintain their business uptime, maintain their service experience while dealing with this massive change that is coming their way. So what they usually look for is, what is the architecture I bet on that allows me as the steward for our organization's IT to change accordingly and be flexible and be a true partner for our own business transformation initiatives. So there's a lot of focus being put on the architectural construct as a result. And when we look at what are the tenets of these architectures, there's a lot changing there as well. Previously you were hard-walled into uh, different kind of environments, and I look at this from the perspective of what I call as centricity variables. So if you were to look at an endpoint, there were a different set of rules for a user, or there were a different set of rules for a site, again, based on the workload being on premises, at the edge, or in the cloud. And you start to draw these out. The LAN was very different from the WAN. IT was different from the OT. And the model for a do-it-yourself kind of technology was different from a provider-based option. Today, these boundaries are all blurring. And it is no longer an either-or approach. It's more of an and approach. And in that scenario, the question then becomes, how do you ensure application performance end-to-end? How do you ensure security, connectivity end-to-end? Because this is really the lifeblood of the organization. And so continuing down this thread of architectural flexibility, the focus is more on how do you choose an architecture that isn't going to paint you into a corner, but gives you the ability to manage change as you move along. So that either or value proposition is shifting to this and value proposition. And so that's where the need for flexibility becomes paramount. You see this massive shift, therefore, happening from these box environments, do-it-yourself environments with complexity, to something that's much more easier to consume. And the expectation of this new normal is that, there is almost an invisible WAN between the user and the application. So today, most applications are hosted in cloud environments, whether it's private, public, and the edge can be anywhere. It could be a user or an entity. The expectation is this chasm between the two really needs to be invisible. So the WAN really needs to behave like a LAN and deliver a LAN-like experience. It has to be highly secure. And we talked about the consumption approach. That's no longer these contracts that are really old school in some sense. So to do that and to do it across any location is really a challenge that we're seeing come up in a big way. Most of companies in the IT space, they were really caught flat-footed due to the pandemic, and everybody adapted. And so part of this approach has really been a wake-up call for many, and say, how do I not be in a similar situation anymore? And so this kind of making things easy in terms of catering to those expectations while still delivering a very delightful experience is where it becomes very hard. So today, if you look at it, this value chain from the application in a cloud to the consumer at the edge has a lot of speed bumps along the way. You have the telco that could be delivering the service, you have a managed service provider entity, you could have a security vendor, a box vendor for a network, and a systems integrator that's coming into the play. So all of them come together and cobble up a solution. And in some ways, what it does is create a fragmented value chain where integration is an afterthought. And so it works till it stops working, and you see the response times are poor, the bumpy experience. And more importantly, when change comes your way, it's very hard to manage it in a graceful manner. So that's where we have taken more of an integrated approach. And what we do is really look at this value chain end to end, tightly integrate it, couple it with managed service, so you have a very fast way to respond to situations, even be proactive, and thereby managing change also becomes easy. So now if you step back and look at what role the network and security constructs play here, we talked about the network wanting to deliver this LAN-like application experience. We talked about security not just being static perimeter-based, but pervasive. Then we talked about the expectations of how do you consume this as an easy-to-use service. All of these get accomplished when they shift to this cloud-first model, with the network and security being dictated by common policies and being delivered as a service. And in some ways, this is essentially the foundation of what Gartner came up with as SASE, which is the convergence of network and network security with all of its different components being delivered as a service. And as you all know, there are different aspects to what a network constitutes, and the security landscape has all been somewhat fragmented. But what we see is the elements of both of these now coming together and adopting a cloud native approach and being delivered as a service. So essentially, that's the foundational element of SASE. And what we've also seen is this consolidation that's happening, not just from a vendor perspective, where different vendors have come together and brought technologies, or they have built technologies in a way that they start to own an unequal share of the pie. And at the same time, we've also seen a consolidation in the buying centers. There were different fragmented buyers previously that are consolidating into these two buying motions of the network and security. And SASE is sort of becoming this new architectural construct, and that evolves to become a unified buyer. So there is a converged technology architecture, and there is a converged buying center, which in some ways was supposed to be several years out. But as I said, the pandemic has accelerated this trend, and we are seeing the motions of this happen in a fairly predominant way right now. So when I look at the landscape for delivering something like this, obviously you have the same box vendors for network and security. You have the managed service providers and the telcos or the network service providers. And what we envision is a unified model that brings these three silos together into an integrated approach that is very easy to consume and delivers an excellent experience for enterprise customers. So this is sort of the vision for our SD-WAN and SASE offering. The network gets delivered as a service. Security is very pervasive. And this is accompanied by a managed service delivery model, which looks at the entire life cycle for both the network as well as network security, and offers a tiered degree of experiences that handholds customers through their journey in terms of build, deploy, and operate. So when you look at this, the architecture that we evangelize is not a box-based architecture, but something that's more cloud-first, something that's POP-based, where the POPs themselves act as clouds. And you have the ability to normalize the edge and the cloud with the fabric that's connecting all of these itself being a multi-cloud fabric. So you should be able to go to a public cloud, private cloud, a hardwired data center. It really shouldn't matter whether it's a user or site at the edge. It really shouldn't matter in terms of the consistency of services that you're able to deliver. And at the same time, the way that you can navigate different tiers of applications, giving each application the kind of prioritization that it warrants or deserves, really becomes the way in which the service fabric flexes and takes traffic from point A to point B with the right degree of application optimization, prioritization, and acceleration. So this becomes a very ubiquitous model for delivering SD-WAN and SASE, and this is the model that we're really seeing a lot of our enterprise ask for and shift towards. And if I were to sort of wrap this presentation up, I would provide three takeaways. The first is to educate yourselves and look at this as a fairly major shift in terms of the architecture that you're making. You may be having an on-premises security. You may be, consuming your network or building your network in a slightly different way. For these to come together and be driven in a cloud-native manner with common policies is a different model. So make sure that you evaluate the need for this architecture, when you want it, and what benefits do you expect to get from it? Because this is not going to happen overnight. So it's a change that you need to prepare for, both from a technology as well as from an organization perspective. The second is determining whether you want to go build this yourself, taking these boxes, take ownership of the value chain that I talked about and stitching it together, or you want to consume it as a service, where you focus on the core tenets of your business and you take this on as a service in much the same way as you look at any other utility, electricity or water, for example. You don't go building around the plumbing and the infrastructure. You consume these as a utility. And today, the technology and the architecture is available for you to consume it as a service and better yet, as a managed service, giving you that flexibility. And that's really the third decision point on whether you, having chosen this approach, you want to manage it yourself, or do you want to subscribe to another entity that will do it for you? So these are all the elements that you need to evaluate as you plan your journey, and it is going to be a journey. We expect this trend to be over the course of the next 10 years or so. Cloud itself has been a 15-year trend. SD-WAN has been a 10-year trend. SASE brings a lot of these things together in a much more complicated way, but the expectation is that it is going to be simple. So with that, let me wrap this presentation up, and I'll also share that we have polled over 1,300 enterprises globally, gotten a lot of inputs from them in terms of their thought process, directions, and we have published a very nice book, which we call as the Global State of the WAN Report. It's in its 5th edition right now, and you can go download it from our website and see what some of your peers are saying out there in the industry as you plan your own journey forward. And we would like to partner with you if possible, or we do hope some of these things are of use to you as a guidebook as you navigate. So with that, let me pause here and wrap the session up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shashi. Shashi, in the previous session as well, when all our panelists were there, and everyone's coming with great experience, I'd ask one question towards the end, and I'd love to know your input as well. Where do you see SD-WAN and SASE, in the short term, evolving 6 to 12 months down the line? What are your thoughts on that before we wrap up your session, Shashi?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of interest in terms of really understanding what both of them mean. Today, there is almost a $150 billion opportunity of customers that are on MPLS-based environments that are wanting to shift off of MPLS and into more cloud-based models. And as they do so, some are going to evolve their network architecture, and some are going to be looking at both their network and security architecture. It really depends on where they are today and where they want to go. And we see enterprises across the spectrum. I really don't anticipate it to be an on-off switch because the network is so vital to the organization, and security is not something you deal with easily. So it is going to be a journey. And so that's the way we look at it. And even within the context of an organization, once they do take a decision, they might actually go about it in a very phased manner. So I think we all need to sort of sit back and enjoy the ride and look at what comes out at the other end of the tunnel. I think the journey is going to be exciting, and that's what I would say, see for the next 6 to 12 months.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that perspective, Shashi. And we wish you all the best to you and your company. And I'd urge all our participants and viewers to visit the booth and get in touch with you and your team for further queries. Thank you, Shashi, on that.
All right. Thank you, Bhavna.